Welcome to my AJAX tutorial. AJAX is a pinnacle technology in web development. What I mean by that is this is not a good starting point if you're a beginner with web development technologies. I recommend you learn a few things before you try and take on a tutorial like this. You should know HTML, you should know JavaScript, you should know servers and protocols, bandwidth, server-side scripting, creating and accessing web services, and it'd also be helpful if you knew something about XML and other data handling technologies on servers. And on here we're going to briefly touch a piece of CSS through JavaScript, but it's not going to be real critical to understand what we're doing. So what are we doing with AJAX? If it's so complicated, why do we love it so much? We love it because it cleans up the bandwidth waste. It makes things run more smoothly on a page. What it is, you are running on the page that is output from the server. After it's already been sent, you're then going to run a request using JavaScript to access a web service that you'll probably create and process that response once you get it back and manipulate the HTML or possibly even other elements. Like I do CSS on this, I manipulate a CSS property, but you may manipulate any number of things by doing that. It saves bandwidth, it keeps the user on track. They aren't constantly getting redirected to the top of the page, not constantly having to wait for pages to be reloaded. It's fast and it's clean. It's very good for those things. So we're going to take a look at this technology. First of all, I'd like to kind of demonstrate a page that I created in here. Now, this and here, you'll notice that there is not any significant space in here. But when we add something here, and who could ever mess up 1 plus 1, except for a computer that has some ambiguous codes, I should say. JavaScript uses the plus operator for both addition and concation. And we took these two fields and added them, but both those fields are actually strings when they're pulled out as fields. So since they were both strings, they were concated together. But it is a good demonstration of creating a new element. It doesn't really create it, it just populated one that was automatically collapsed because it was empty. So we grabbed that element and put in 1 and 1 concated. So take a look here. We've got our response field, we have our text fields here, and we have 3 buttons. We are now going to take a look at the source code of this page. I'll explain the source code, and then I'll demonstrate this page in action. So we have our standard page, except for that we have a huge bunch of JavaScript up here in the header. Not as huge as some sites, but pretty big compared to what we're used to seeing on this channel. And bunch of script, which I will explain that in a little bit. Right over here is that result, ID result tag that we're going to throw our results into. Down here we have our number fields. This is that table that we had with the 2 text fields for the number. It's just a text field with a number. There's no form because this is all script related. We're not posting back to the server. And down here we have our buttons. They're just buttons. They're not submits. They're buttons, and they have text in them, and they have an on-click event that will call a JavaScript function, any one of 3 functions, to add locally, add using get, or add using post. And why do we need to have a difference on those? Because there's actually 4 options when using AJAX. And we're going to demonstrate two of them directly, but I will explain how that actually becomes four. So it's because we have both get and post for methods, and then we also have synchronous and asynchronous. Using get, this is going to be the simple one. This is the add locally. This is where we did the one earlier, and they just concate because they use that plus up there between the fields. But then we come down here, and there's the other two functions. And using post only requires like one extra line of code. To use asynchronous uses about 4 extra lines of code. However, I'll explain the differences between the two, and you decide if you really want, actually not really 4 extra lines, it's 3 extra lines. No, it's 4 extra lines to use asynchronous. So I'll explain why that is, what those lines are, all that. But the simple one is get synchronous, using the synchronous type of get. Now for either one, we're going to get the HTTP client. That is a part of the XML library. That's where the XML comes in. It's meant to get XML documents to be able to parse in and get extra information to your script. However, we can use it for all kinds of stuff, and we use it to get other interactions as well. So that's there. We are going to open our connection, and that's where we have our request method, either get or post. Then we have down here where we're going to. If we have any query string items, we're going to have a question mark on any of the query string values to our service. In this case here, we're sending it on up. We're using the same web service that we created for our web services tutorial. Now, we are also sending in our numbers. We need to make sure that those are also properly encoded. Everything is properly encoded on here too. You know, not a space, but a plus on that, because this is URL encoding. So we URL encode that, put it all up there in the URL. Everything we need. And this is for RB asynchronous, false. So we are synchronous, meaning we will block until we get our response. I'll go into a little bit more detail on that after I'm done explaining more of the code. So then we go to send, and this is where it would block. That's where it's going to tell it to go ahead and send that request off, and if it's synchronous, we are going to hold. It won't return from the send function until it has a response. And then once we get that response, we can process it right here because we did so synchronously. So our result is already ready in this function. And so we grab the response text from the server and out of the client, and we send that to a function that I will show this function again later on. It's down over here after you're done with the post. But the post and the get are both going to send to that display AJAX result. They're both going to end up going there. That's the result that will parse the response from the server. So once we get our response in, it goes to that function. It will parse it and figure out, is it good, is it bad, what do I need to do with this? All that will be in place. All right, now we're going to go into functions. Again, this is the other function that is using the post. Same thing, we're going to create the XML HTTP request. One of those extra lines of code is right here. We need to put a handler on this because we cannot handle the response data after we're done. Once we send off this request, it's not going to be right here in this function. We're not going to be able to handle it in line. We have to send it to another function because this function will have exited and shut down once our code returns. Because here we are doing asynchronous is true. We're doing this as synchronous. All right, we're doing this as asynchronous at this point. So we're doing it as posted and to the same. We didn't have any query string on this because we're sending it all in the body. That's something we can do in the send. The send argument is everything that goes in the body of the HTTP request to the server. Alright, so we have post, and so we're opening that up. Now we're going to come down here, and this is our other line, so one extra line we got to do to send using AJAX to send a post request. It's probably one of the simplest ways to add it as a post request on AJAX. And that's where we're going to make sure that we tell it whenever we send information in the body, we need to make sure that we tell the server what type of information that is. And that's what we're doing here. We're telling it it is World Wide Web form URL encoded, name value pair, in other words. It's a name value pair request. So we got a bunch of variables in there. So that's same as if you'd used post on your browser form. So we have our header set. That's our other line for post. And then we send everything that we were sending up here, just in the post format. We're just sending it all down here. Same thing. All right, now at the end, down here, we have our, we cannot put that because we are going to be exiting immediately. This will not block and wait until it has a valid response. We don't have a valid response yet. When it does, it will call this function. So it is going to go ahead and return and allow the user to get on with their business. So as soon as they push the button, it starts the process and then allows it to return back to them being able to work with whatever they have. Once that process is completed, it will notify us, and then we can complete that process. As opposed to using Synchronous, it will run the entire process right away, and it will wait endlessly for that process to do if it needs to be endlessly. Now this is where we have get result from AJAX. This is not display AJAX result. This is this one here, but it basically just passes on. This is the HTTP client. That's what that means here. Is since this is an event from there, that is the object that the event pertains to. So the response text is going to now be sent to the same function as we had up here. This is where we're merging. So now we're going to take in that resulting text and parse it out to be something different. So if you remember our old text from our old tutorial, it has a plus or a minus indicating whether or not it's an error response or whether it's a good response. Plus, if it's positive, we like the response, it's the sum of our numbers. Minus, if it's saying that we need an API key or something else is wrong, if it wants to return an error, it will be a minus, and then whatever that message is. If it's none of that, first of all, we are going to assign this variable to that's that p tag element. That's a reference to the p tag. And now we're going to take a look into here, and we're going to see, is the resulting data's length valid for our format? Can we split it the way we need to? If it is valid, then we're going to be taking a look here at our result code. We're going to split that, get our code, our plus or our minus sign, and get the rest of the information in two separate strings, result code and result text. Now, if the result code is good, we want a yellow background. That's where we're using that CSS on here. On that tag, I'm setting its background using the CSS attribute to yellow. And I'm coming into here, and I'm going to turn it to red if it's not good. If it's something different, I'm going to turn it to red. And down here, if it's not a valid result, I'm going to say it's an unknown error because it doesn't have enough space in there to tell me that it has an error. And I'm also going to turn it red. And then I'm going to put inside that p tag, and inside of its inner text will be my resulting text. So that's how this whole thing works. Let's take a look at that in action. So what happens whenever I send this thing out to the server? Do I get a more intelligent response than 11 for 1 plus 1? it does better math, and it has better color. Okay, it was our programming, but still. And that held. Some browsers would have showed if this had been a longer response, if this had been a longer process out on the web where I had to run and do whatever I needed to do, I would have been pushing that button, and I may have even seen it hang in the down position until this yellow bar showed up. As opposed to post, it is the same thing, it's just it's posting to the server, but the main thing that makes that go faster is that it's asynchronous. So it's going to start the process on that, immediately return, let me continue doing whatever I'm doing, and then once it's completed, then it will allow me the opportunity to do whatever it is that I choose to do with that at that point. So it has two stages that it's working in, and it allows me to work in between, as opposed to asynchronous. Sure, it takes 4 extra lines of code. I have to open up a function and do my curly braces there, and I've got to have the assignment to that function. But 4 extra lines of code, depends on the length of your call here, might be worth your while. So you can see there's a lot of good uses for this other than adding machines. I'm sure play around with it. AJAX is a lot more useful than just cleaning your toilet. Thank you for watching.